Hi there. I decided that I probably should do a video on what is vulnerable living. I'm not talking about living vulnerably on the outside. That'll be the natural progression of things, because being vulnerable inside and connecting, maybe reconnecting, or perhaps connecting with yourself inside in ways that you never have, is the way that I'm talking about living vulnerably. And then what happens on the outside is that you find yourself in situations where it's safe to be vulnerable because you're connected to yourself. I say that change is an inside job, and that's what vulnerable living is, a complete and total inside job. It's really exciting to teach people about this because, our culture teaches us to be focused on what's outside. Who's your boyfriend or your husband? Where are you working? What's your education? Where do you live? What kind of car do you drive? That focus on the outside is just superficial, and it leaves most people longing for something much more. That's a whole other discussion, but let me just say that most of our life around us on the outside is marketed to us, to that deep longing that we all feel inside, and it never gets met. We've always got to have more, buy more, do more, replace things. It's just never satisfying. What I'm talking about is living a life of connection and vulnerability inside that leaves you feeling like you trust yourself, like you feel connected, like you know how you feel, and you're not scared to feel what you feel, and you don't get stuck in what you feel. You can feel everything with yourself and be okay, regardless of what's happening on the outside. That's what vulnerable living is. This is just an overview, but it's significant, this way of living. It's not the way most people are living. And that's why it's exciting to me to bring people back to themselves, maybe to themselves for the first time in ways that they've never experienced. That's what vulnerable living is. So I want to quickly just go over a really important aspect of vulnerable living, which is knowing that inside of you, you have these three aspects, these three important aspects inside that for most people are tangled. They're entangled with each other. There's the vulnerable self, also known as the child aspect. Then there's the parent self, and then the adult self. And what I learned in sort of creating this as I went along in my own healing process was that for myself, and what I learned working with other people, is that most of us kind of ignore that vulnerable self, that child self. We ignore it like it was ignored in us. And that's the part that feels things, that tells us, it's also where our intuition lies. It tells us when things feel comfortable or uncomfortable, when we feel like we want to move closer to something or further away. And many of us have learned to not trust that part. We've stopped trusting that part because the parent part inside, the next part I'm going to talk about, has learned to ignore those feelings, those subtle knowings, the feelings that we get in our body and emotions that come up for us. The parent part inside is kind of checked out like our parents were, or tells us, stop feeling that way. Why don't you just get over it? It's not a big deal. Or is ignoring us or critical of us. That's what I find most internal parents inside of people are doing. And then there's the adult self. And the adult self is the part of us that's job is to be curious about patterns that are repeating inside, to notice things on the outside, and that adult part is supposed to make decisions. For most of us, this is all tangled up inside. The vulnerable self isn't being paid attention to or is diminished or criticized. The parent is not doing its job of just loving and seeing that vulnerable aspect. And often the adult part, just is sort of not really in play. So let me give you an example. For many people, the vulnerable aspect is the part that picks partners, that chooses jobs, that chooses friends, that kind of runs amok, is making adult decisions, and no one is manning the helm. Often the parent self is the part that, honestly, a lot of parent selves that I know are the parts that drink, the parts that check out, that have addictions or overindulge in all kinds of things to avoid being present with the vulnerable self. And then, like I said, the adult self is often sort of not really present or is entangled in the other aspects. What I do with teaching people about vulnerable living is teach them how to unentangle and how to appropriately be in each aspect to your greatest advantage, so that you can have a strong, solid inner life that you can lean into, that can be your place of solace and self-connection, so that you're not dependent on others for those basic emotional safeties and resources of support inside. Actually, vulnerable living is about becoming an emotional adult, reaching in to yourself rather than these constant external hopes, misguided hope that something on the outside is going to make you feel better. It never does. But let me tell you, when you unentangle the inside, when you just sit in your parent self, loving parent self, with the feelings in your body and in your emotions, when the adult can observe it all just from a neutral, curious place, and then make decisions for you in your outside world, in your jobs, in your relationships, make decisions that are based on being connected to yourself, everything on the outside changes. Everything. Because the way you're looking at the world is from a solid, loving place inside of you. You recognize that the critical parent never worked. It was never helpful when you were little, and it's not helpful now. What happens is that you are appropriately connected inside, and you love yourself and appreciate yourself. You acknowledge your shortcomings, and you're willing to work on them. It all changes on the inside, and then what happens on the outside is miraculous and bigger than you could even imagine, bigger and better. It's an amazing process. I hope you'll keep coming back. Please share this video if it was helpful to you with someone else. If this was, information that was confusing, or if you want more information, feel free to leave messages below. If it was helpful, let me know. I'm also available on Messenger. Feel free to personally message me. I help people in this arena, and it's an honor to do so. Just kind of as a side note, I'm going to be creating a vulnerable living Zoom group soon. I'm really excited to offer that to you guys. So anyway, keep coming back. Make it a great day and connect inside. Come back to you. Keep coming back to you. That's the practice. Bye for now.